There's a part of your mind that wants you dead. Not physically, something much worse. It wants you alive just enough to keep suffering. So it invents problems, imagines disasters, fabricates enemies, and then convinces you they're real. It whispers fears so believable that you start obeying them. And here's the cruel truth. You're not living your life anymore. You're living a nightmare your own mind created, and you never even noticed the moment it took over. Have you noticed that 90% of the conversations you have happen with yourself? Internally, in mental dialogues that repeat scenes that didn't happen, rehearse fights that never existed, prepare excuses for accusations no one made. It's as if there's an enemy living inside your head who convinced you that he is you. And this enemy has one objective: to keep you trapped in the anticipation of pain, as if suffering were security, as if preparing for the worst would free you from it. Robert Adams said, "You're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Everything you believe is wrong only because you believe it." And this is almost offensive to hear, because the pain seems real, the fear is almost physical, but what he's saying, and what you need to hear until the end of this video, is that there's something much worse than your problems: the belief that they're inevitable. You don't need to believe in spirituality, in energy, in any guru, but you need to face the fact that your mind created a world where everything goes wrong, and you're living there as if it were real, as if it were your only option. It's not. You've been hijacked by thoughts, by beliefs, by voices that aren't even yours, but that you repeat as if they were commandments. This isn't exaggeration, this is observation. People die every day without ever having lived a moment in peace, not for lack of love, money, or opportunities, but because their heads were a battlefield, and no one wins inside an imaginary war. And the question I ask you now, with all the weight it deserves, is, are you really in trouble, or did you just learn to live as if you were? What you call a problem might just be a thought that was repeated too much and ended up becoming reality in your head. If you realize that suffering doesn't need a concrete reason to exist, it only needs a narrative, a poorly told mental sequence, distorted but repeated so many times that it became sacred. The mind is brilliant, but when ungoverned, it's not just confused, it's cruel. It's a factory of distorted versions of reality operating 24 hours a day without supervision, and worse, with you believing everything it produces. Robert Adams said coldly, "There's no suffering in the now. What you feel is just memory and projection." It sounds esoteric, but it's logical. You don't suffer from what's happening. You suffer from what you think is about to happen, or from what happened that you can't forget. In other words, you're at war with things that aren't here. This is the silent tragedy of most people. They don't live in reality. They live in anticipations, in hypotheses, in mental fantasies about futures that never arrive, or pasts that don't return. Neuroscience has already mapped this. There's a network in the brain called the default mode network, a structure directly linked to mental rumination, repetitive thinking, and the creation of internal stories. It activates when you're not doing anything, and while the body rests, the mind begins to tell tragedies. This explains why so many people freak out in silence, on Sunday night, at bedtime, in the shower, because that's when the factory starts operating at full force. Without external distractions, the internal machinery catches fire. Phrases like, "I'm afraid of the future," or "I can't forget what happened," are common, socially accepted, almost poetic, but in reality, they're confessions that we're living inside an illusory system of chronic suffering manufactured by the mind itself. Real examples abound. People who live as if they're being emotionally persecuted, not by other people, but by their own thoughts. A woman who avoids relationships for fear of being betrayed, even though she never has been. A man who sabotages himself professionally, believing he's insufficient, even having all the proof to the contrary. Someone who can't enjoy anything good because they're always expecting the moment when everything will collapse. These people aren't suffering because of the world, they're suffering because of the interpretation they make of it. And here's the most insidious part. The more you fight against these thoughts, the more power you give them. As Jung said, what you resist persists.
Robert Adams pointed to the obvious that no one wants to face. You believe your thoughts because no one taught you to question them. Everything you feel started with a thought, and the problem is that thought by itself has no commitment to the truth. It has commitment to old patterns, to unresolved traumas, to outdated versions of yourself.
That's why so many intelligent people suffer in stupid ways, because it's not a question of knowing, it's a question of believing. And if you believe you're in danger, the body reacts, the nervous system responds, the heart accelerates, breathing shortens, even though there's nothing out there trying to hurt you. You're reacting to a lie told from within. The mind fabricates the suffering, and the body pays the bill. The craziest part? This mechanism is automatic. It's like an emotional algorithm. A hidden trauma generates a thought. The thought triggers an emotion. The emotion feeds back into the thought, and the cycle closes. And there you are, reliving the same pain as if it were new. It's not new, it's just recurrent. And here begins the path to liberation, seeing thought as thought, nothing more. Robert Adams said with murderous simplicity, if you stop believing in the thought, it disappears because it has no existence of its own. It's not about stopping thinking, that's impossible. It's about stopping believing everything you think. And to the mind, this is an insult because it wants to be taken seriously. It wants you to react. It wants to keep you inside the game. But if you can see the plot without acting in it, the spell breaks. Everything you're feeling might not be real. It might just be a loose thought, repeated, reinforced, and finally made sacred. A problem that never truly existed, but gained power because you offered it your attention. The mind is a factory, but you can shut down production. You don't think the way you think because you chose to. You think this way because you were taught not to think any other way. This is perhaps the hardest prison to see because it's made of things you think are yours, but aren't. Your opinions, your fears, your desires, your judgments. All of this was stitched into you since childhood, an invisible backdrop that defines how you perceive the world and mainly how you perceive yourself. And here's the blind spot. Most of your reactions don't come from conscious decisions, but from emotional programming that was installed when you didn't even know what an I was yet. Robert Adams said with the lightness of someone who sees through human theater, you're trapped in a prison where the door was never locked. But to realize this, you need to start looking inward with more honesty than ever. Because it's uncomfortable to recognize that you don't know if you love what you love, or if you learned you should love it. That maybe you don't fear what you fear, you were just taught to fear it. And this starts early. The child isn't born afraid of making mistakes, she learns. When she's punished for expressing a feeling, she understands that showing herself is dangerous. When she's ignored in pain, she learns that suffering in silence is safer than asking for help. When she's only praised for performance, she grows up thinking she needs to be useful to deserve love. This is invisible conditioning, the psychological mold that says this is okay, that isn't, and that transforms living beings into obedient characters. In adult life, this becomes a script. Have you noticed there are people who can't feel at peace even when they're alone? It's because external noise has been internalized. Criticism became mental voice, judgment became self-demand, punishment became automatic guilt. And worse, the mind rationalizes all of this with phrases like, I'm just like this, I've always been anxious, my head won't stop. But it's not true. You're not any of that. You're conditioned to react this way. They're programs running in the background. The pain you feel isn't current, it's inherited, transmitted by generations who also didn't know what they were doing. The Vedic philosophy calls this samskara, psychic impressions that shape unconscious behavior. They're psychic scars that act as filters. Everything you see passes through them. And then the cruelest truth, you might be seeing the world through the traumas of someone who died decades ago. Robert Adams didn't mince words. What you call I is just memory. Free yourself of that and see what remains. This sounds radical, and it is, but only the radical can cut the root.
Because as long as you try to improve the conditioned self, you'll spin in circles. You'll paint the prison bars a different color, but you'll still be trapped. Real examples? Hundreds. The woman who spent her life explaining herself because she was raised in a house where her presence needed justification. The man who became a sick perfectionist because he learned he'd only be loved if he were the best. The person who sabotages victories because they carry the belief they don't deserve them, a belief installed by a childhood where love came with punishment. None of this is destiny, it's conditioning.
Modern psychology recognizes this clearly. Albert Ellis, creator of rational emotive therapy, already said that suffering comes from learned irrational beliefs, not from facts. Pain doesn't come from the event, it comes from interpretation. Except the most perverse thing is that these interpretations aren't conscious, they're automatic. They're mental shortcuts built by years of emotional reinforcement. And here's the subtlest part. The ego clings to its own suffering as if it were identity. You've seen this, right? People who can't leave pain because without it they don't know who they are. The person who complains about anxiety but feels empty when it disappears. The one who says they want peace but sabotages silence because silence forces them to face their own emptiness. Robert Adams warned, the mind likes pain because it makes it feel alive. But that's a lie. Peace is what you are. The rest is conditioning. It's not about defeating the mind. That only reinforces the conflict. It's about observing without reactivity the movements of it, seeing the thought arising and not following it, seeing the old belief activating and not obeying. This is the beginning of real freedom, when the old program runs but you don't click the button. Because yes, the conditioning is still there, but it loses force like background music you don't listen to anymore. And for the first time, you act, you don't react. You decide, you don't repeat. And then real silence begins. Not of the mouth, but of the soul that stopped obeying what was never hers. Every attempt at control is born from fear, and every fear is born from the illusion that you should control something. This is a silent wound, the modern compulsion to try to predict, guarantee, adjust, calculate, as if life were an operating system that, if configured correctly, wouldn't give errors. But the truth is brutal. Your need for control is the greatest symptom of your insecurity. It's like a sophisticated addiction. You don't realize you're trying to control everything, even other people's reactions, the rhythm of time, others' opinions, the future that doesn't even exist yet. But you are. And the price is very high. Robert Adams said, there's nothing out there that needs to be fixed. Everything that needs to change is in your mind and only there. But your mind believes the chaos is outside. That's why you live like an emotional vigilante, scanning people, predicting scenarios, rehearsing responses, preparing escape routes for problems that only exist in your projection. And the cruelest part, the more you try to control, the more you suffer. Because everything you try to hold with force escapes. Love, health, time, attention. Life escapes from closed fists because it was never yours to be dominated. It can only be lived. The obsession with control is linked to chronic anxiety, one of the most democratic ailments of the century. Anxiety isn't an excess of future, it's an excess of attempts to control what cannot be controlled. It's you wanting to guarantee tomorrow with today's energy, and failing because that's simply impossible. Abundant examples. The person who checks the same message 5 times before sending, afraid to be misinterpreted. The professional who rewrites an email for 40 minutes because they need to appear impeccable. The father who suffocates his child with rules, not of malice, but because he wants to prevent him from feeling the pains he himself felt. The woman who projects insecurities onto her partner, creating scenes that never existed just to feel she has some control over the fear of being abandoned. None of this is about the other. It's about you. Your mind creating problems so it can have the relief of solving them. A functional neurosis, a false emotional heroism. And here comes the raw philosophy. Control is an infantile attempt to protect yourself from pain. You try to control the world because somewhere in your history you felt powerless before something that hurt you, and now, unconsciously, you try to guarantee it never happens again. But this is impossible because pain isn't avoidable.
It's part of the process. It's what shapes, transforms, reveals. The attempt to live without pain is the cause of all unnecessary pain. Robert Adams cut through the veil. There's nothing to fear. There's only something to understand, that everything is already exactly as it should be. This phrase is almost unbearable for a controlling mind because it demands surrender, and the mind hates surrendering. It wants the illusion that it's in command, even if it has to live tense, exhausted, vigilant to maintain that role. Behavioral psychology shows that the desire for control is directly linked to the fear of vulnerability, and vulnerability is the natural condition of existence. No life is guaranteed, no relationship is stable, no emotion is permanent. When you truly accept this, not just as a concept, the body relaxes, the heart slows down, the mind silences, because the war ends. There's no longer a need to predict, control, protect everything.
Peace begins in the acceptance of risk. And this acceptance isn't passivity, isn't giving up, it's maturity. It's the wisdom not to spend your life trying to avoid life, because that's what control does. It replaces living with watching, and you begin to merely exist without presence, without surrender, without truth. Robert said, real freedom begins when you stop trying to control what was never yours. So the question that echoes is, what exactly are you trying to protect yourself from? From pain? From failure? From abandonment? Are you trying to protect yourself from the possibility of surrendering completely and discovering that living fully was always risky anyway? There's no easy answer, but there is a starting point: letting go. Letting go of the need to predict, to be certain, to be right, to be perfect, to be loved all the time, to be invulnerable. Because all of this is just another elegant way to continue suffering from problems that never existed, except in your desperate attempt to prevent them from existing. Some people don't want to heal because deep down they prefer to suffer rather than disappear. This is one of the most indigestible truths Robert Adams revealed. There's a hidden pleasure in pain, a perverse form of identity that makes many people, even while saying they want to change, cling to suffering like a shipwrecked person clings to a piece of rotten wood. The logic is subtle and dangerous. If I stop suffering, who will I be? If I heal this wound, what's left of me? Many people aren't attached to pain itself, but to the meaning it offers, to the role it fulfills, to the narrative it constructs. Because even if it's a narrative of failure, rejection, abandonment, or injustice, it's a narrative, it's an I. And the mind prefers a wounded I to the emptiness of not knowing who it is. Robert Adams saw this clearly. The ego feeds on drama. If you stop suffering, it dies, and it doesn't want to die. Pain, then, becomes identity. The person isn't just sad, she is a sad person. Doesn't just have anxiety, she is anxious. Doesn't feel abandonment, she is abandoned. And when suffering becomes the definition, abandoning the pain is the same as abandoning yourself. This is the invisible addiction, the pain that sustains the ego. The pain that guarantees attention, that gives meaning, that justifies failures, that offers emotional control over others. Because there are people who learned, and early, that they're only seen when they're broken. Suffering becomes a language, a way of belonging, a social currency disguised as lament. You've seen this, right? People who sabotage themselves when everything is going well, who start a fight the moment peace settles, who lose interest when calm arrives, who create problems, tension relationships, dramatize simple gestures, all to return to their comfort zone: pain. Deep psychology recognizes this pattern as the secondary gain of suffering. It's the hidden benefit that pain offers, and as long as that gain exists, healing won't be a real choice. Brutally real examples. The woman who says she wants a stable relationship but repeatedly gets involved with emotionally unavailable men because it confirms the old story that she'll never be chosen. The man who lives complaining about lack of time but rejects any attempt at organization because chaos justifies his sense of importance. The person who says they want inner peace but gets involved in useless arguments on social media because conflict feeds their sense of relevance. The adult who carries a childhood resentment like a medal
because letting it go would mean admitting they can already move forward, and that's scary. Robert Adams didn't soften. You're always exactly where you want to be, because if you didn't want to, you would have already changed. This statement is violent for the ego, because it removes the victim role, exposes the silent complicity with pain, and nobody likes being accused of keeping their own prison standing. But there's an essential point here. It's not about guilt, it's about awareness. You're not guilty for having gotten used to pain, but now that you know, you're responsible for not perpetuating it. The mind, like any addict, will resist withdrawal. It will try to convince you that pain is normal, part of who you are, just life. It will try to seduce you with nostalgia for tragedy. It will dramatize memories. It will sabotage new choices. It will say that healing is denying your history. But all of this is a lie. Healing is honoring your history, precisely because you don't want to repeat it anymore. And this healing won't come from thinking, nor from repeating ready-made phrases. It comes from radical presence, from observing with loving coldness the mechanisms of suffering, from seeing how it activates, why it activates, what fear sustains it. That's when the addiction starts to lose force. When you see yourself activating the script but no longer perform it. When you perceive the trigger but don't pull. When pain appears but you don't merge with it, you just observe. Robert Adams described this with lightness. Suffering is like a bad dream. It only seems real while you're sleeping. Waking up, therefore, isn't a magical process. It's a process of painful lucidity, of breaking with the pleasures of suffering, of saying goodbye to the identity that hurts but comforts. And then, only then, you notice something surprising. There's no identity outside of pain, but there is freedom. And freedom is what remains when you no longer need to be anyone to justify being alive. You're not tired because you work too much. You're exhausted because you fight against everything all the time. Fight to be accepted, fight to understand, fight to predict, fight not to feel, fight to keep standing an identity that's silently crumbling inside. This fight is the great fatigue of the human soul. And maybe you don't notice because it has no weapons or screams. It's an internal war, constant, discreet, chronic. Robert Adams said with devastating tenderness, "Stop resisting. Peace begins when the war ends, and the war always starts inside you." This surrender isn't passivity, it's the opposite of giving up. It's wisdom. It's the recognition that the flow of life is much more intelligent than any narrative your mind can create. It's the end of the effort to be someone and the beginning of surrendering to everything that already is. But to get there, you need to face the ego head-on. Ego not as vanity, but as illusion. The illusion that there's a separate I controlling, deciding, judging, choosing, when in reality, everything is simply happening. You never decided to exist, never chose the shape of your body, the chemistry of your brain, the time you were born, the family you fell into, the traumas that shaped you. You're here, now, breathing, but you think you're the author of everything you feel, that you control the movie, when in reality, you're just the screen. And this perception, though terrifying to the ego, is liberating, because it shows you can stop fighting, stop carrying the world, stop trying to control waves that were always bigger than you. Suffering, as we've seen, is the direct result of resistance, and resistance is born from the belief that this shouldn't be happening. But life doesn't make mistakes in the script. It never consulted your opinion. See the paradox. The more you resist what is, the more trapped you become. And the more you let go, the more space you have. Robert Adams spoke of this with brutal simplicity. You only suffer because you believe something should be different from what it is. Accepting doesn't mean liking nor resigning yourself. Accepting is an act of profound intelligence. It's saying, since this is here, I allow myself to see what it wants to show me. This is surrender. And it's not something you do, it's something that happens when the ego tires of trying to be God. And here's the secret. This surrender isn't the end, it's the beginning. Because what's born after it isn't passivity, it's clarity. You act better when you're not trying to force. You respond with more precision when you're not trapped in fear. You live with more presence when you stop trying to beat life. See what happens when a person truly surrenders.
Resentment loses meaning. Hurry dissolves. Anxiety ceases because the future stops being a threat. Forgiveness emerges naturally without effort. Comparison disappears because you're no longer trying to prove anything. It's not magic, it's real. It's physiological, it's spiritual, it's rational. The nervous system relaxes, the brain silences, energy flows, because the internal conflict, what wears you most, ceases. Robert said, "You are not your thoughts. You are the silent space in which they arise." This awareness doesn't need to be understood, it needs to be lived. And living this is so simple it seems inaccessible. Just stop. Stop arguing with life. Stop demanding answers. Stop wanting everything to be your way. When this stopping happens, even for a few seconds, there's peace. And this peace doesn't depend on circumstances. It doesn't need money, someone loving you, a resolved past, a guaranteed future. It only needs presence. Total, silent, complete presence. What Robert Adams taught wasn't a path, it was a non-path. Because what you're looking for is already here. You don't need more effort, you need less. Less control, less defense, less thinking, less identity. When all of this falls away, what remains isn't the end. It's you, without masks, without fear, without the need to understand, just being. And for the first time, that's enough. You're not alone on this journey. If you made it here, if you heard every word, if you felt something pulse inside, know that this is already a form of transformation. And just for that, it was all worth it. Because while the world pushes us outward, accelerates us, demands more versions and less essence, there's a space here where you can breathe, think, feel, without rush, without pretense. Here, the truth isn't shouted, it's revealed in silence. And you're part of this. When you watch, comment, share, you're helping to keep this space alive. And that's not small, that's huge. But if you feel this touches you more deeply, if this content speaks to your soul, if it gives you something you don't find anywhere else, then consider going beyond. By becoming a channel member, you help us continue creating with depth, responsibility, and beauty. And more than that, you enter a more intimate circle, where exchange is constant, direct, where you participate more closely in what we're building. Exclusive content, behind the scenes, conversations, and a place where superficiality doesn't enter. And if you want to thank in a one-time way, you can also use the Super Thanks feature, which is right here below. It's a way of saying, this touched me, this made a difference. But please, understand clearly, just by being here, you're already helping, a lot. Every view, every word in the comments, every share with someone who needs to hear this, that's what keeps this message alive. This channel isn't mine, it's ours. This silence that welcomes, this content that liberates, this space that provokes, it's made with you. So breathe, feel, and if it's true for you, support however you can. But above all, take this with you, because the only thing this channel wants is for you to awaken. And awakened, you change everything.